Hi, I am Dr. Marissa Brash, and I want to talk today about some of the foundational concepts of the different types of theories and models that really guide our public health interventions. So these are the frameworks that are critical for really understanding health behaviors and also for developing effective strategies that enable us to improve public health outcomes. So first, I want to start by exploring why we really need these theories and models. So theories and models are essential in public health for several reasons. So first off, they provide structure. They offer a systematic way to allow us to organize our ideas and our approaches. They also aid in prediction. So they help us to anticipate outcomes and also to identify key factors that influence health behaviors. They also bring efficiency to our work. So that allows us to build on previous research and best practices. They're also really important for evaluation because they offer a benchmark for us to measure the success and impact of the programs that we create. So I want to also make sure that we're able to distinguish between theories and models because sometimes you see them used interchangeably, but they're actually two distinct topics. So theories are broad explanatory frameworks that describe relationships between concepts. So they tend to be abstract and generalizable across different contexts. So on the other hand, models are more specific applications of these theories, and they're really designed to fit into particular situations. So models tend to be more practical, and they often involve some sort of visual representation of processes. And this then makes them easier to apply in real world scenarios. So again, theories are more broad and models are really more applied to specific practices and disciplines. So every theory is made up of several key parts. So one of those key parts is a concept. And so concepts are the fundamental ideas or building blocks. Sometimes you might see them as like self-efficacy or social norms. We have definitions which clarify what each concept means within the context of the theory. Relational statements describe how these concepts interact and influence each other. And then finally, assumptions are the underlying beliefs or the premises that the theory is based upon. There are different, levels of theories that can be applied in public health. So at the individual level, the theories tend to focus on personal factors. So this can be things like knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs. And then we have the interpersonal level, which examines how relationships and social interactions affect health choices. Then you get to the community level, where you're addressing broader social and environmental factors that can impact population health. Then finally, you get to the program level, which guides the development, implementation, and evaluation of those public health interventions. So jumping into our first theory, and we're going to go through quite a few theories today. The first one I want to talk about is the stimulus response theory. This is one of the simplest but most powerful models that tends to be used a lot in behavioral psychology. So it involves 3 steps. The first step is a stimulus. This is an external factor or event that triggers a response. Then the next step is cognitive processing. And this occurs when the brain interprets the stimulus based on these past experiences. And then finally, the response is the individual's behavior that results from this cognitive process. So this is a theory that most people have heard of before. It's kind of like that Pavlovian dog and bell relationship. So I have a couple of examples that I think are kind of helpful just to kind of drill this idea home. So here's the first one, which is an example from the TV show, The Big Bang Theory, one of my favorite shows that takes science and kind of makes it interesting, fun, relevant. So what I have here is just in terms of being able to share this content online, things that I don't own. I have YouTube clips, so you can scan the QR code. It'll take you to the YouTube clip. It's an example of stimulus response theory where Sheldon is conditioning Penny. So he uses both positive and negative reinforcement in this clip. So you can see the positive reinforcement comes in the form of chocolate. The negative reinforcement comes in the form of water. But it's a really great clip that helps demonstrate how you can potentially train someone. Also brings apart some of those ideas of like ethical implications of stimulus response theory. Just because you can train somebody doesn't always mean that you should, but just kind of being aware of what that theory kind of represents. And then another great example of the stimulus response theory that comes from the media. So this is a clip from the show The Office. And in this case, Jim is conditioning Dwight. So each time Dwight hears the sound of a computer chime, he gets offered an appointment. And so over time, you can see Dwight automatically starts to extend his hand whenever he hears a chime. And this demonstrates this idea of stimulus response conditioning. So another great example that hopefully helps you remember this theory by giving kind of some examples. The next theory we're going to look at is called the theory of reasoned action, or the theory of planned behavior. So basically the theory of reasoned action came first, and then there's an extension of it, which is called the theory of planned behavior. Both of them are pretty similar. They focus on how individual intentions tend to lead to behavior. So we have this idea of attitudes, which refer to the personal beliefs and the consequences of a behavior. Subjective norms involve the perceived social pressures to perform or not to perform the behavior. A perceived behavioral control is the belief in one's ability to perform the behavior. And that's the key addition to the theory of planned behavior. That's what sets these two theories apart. So these factor together then influence behavioral intention. And that's the immediate precursor to actual behavior. It's a cute little graphic on the screen to hopefully, again, kind of solidify what this theory means. Then we have the health belief model, and the health belief model is one of the most widely used frameworks that you see for health behaviors in public health, as well as in other types of health disciplines like nursing. We see a couple of important components. So one is perceived susceptibility. This is an individual's belief about their likelihood of getting the condition. Then we have perceived severity, which refers to that individual's belief about the seriousness of the condition and its consequences. Perceived benefits are the individual's belief in the effectiveness of some sort of intervention or advised action that would enable them to reduce their risk. And then finally, we have perceived barriers. These are the different types of costs that a person sees that prevent them from taking the advised action. So again, cute little health belief model graphic on the screen to help kind of drill that home. If you guys know anything about me in terms of my teaching strategy and something that I do in all my classes, I always like to have creative integration. So while I teach everything with the actual topics, I also like to throw in fun little graphics or things like that, social media clips, memes, etc., that help you to kind of remember these theories and differentiate them between themselves. So another fun example of the health belief model. This is from one of those memes, which is like the, this is fine while the house is burning around you. I think that this does a really great job of kind of drilling home this idea of the health belief model. Again, we know that perceived susceptibility refers to an individual's belief about the likelihood of some kind of adverse reaction. So in public health, we're usually talking about like getting a disease or getting some kind of health condition. So if someone believes that they're not at risk, then they're less likely to take preventative actions. So in the meme here, we see, the dog. He represents someone who is downplaying their risk. So he doesn't really see any perceived susceptibility of any sort of risk or issue. So you can see the dog kind of ignoring the fire surrounding him. So in this particular case, I'd say that the fire represents like a health threat or a health risk, such as like, in this case, the risk of burning. But it could also public health be the risk of like contracting a disease. And so when you see like the dog's nonchalant attitude, you can see he believes that he's not actually in danger. In the health belief model, we also have perceived severity, and perceived severity refers to the individual's belief about the seriousness of the condition and its potential consequences. So if that person believes that they're not at risk, there's no severe health issue at stake, even if they acknowledge that there's a risk, then they're less likely to take action. So in this potential, meme example, the fire represents the severity of like a health threat. So even though the dog has a calm demeanor, there's still this fire that, presents obvious danger, which I think suggests that he doesn't perceive the situation as severe. So this kind of reflects how some people might recognize a health risk, but then they underestimate the seriousness of the potential impact. So even they might be like, okay, I get that there's a risk, they don't take action because they don't actually see it. So just kind of hopefully an example to help you recognize this idea of both perceived susceptibility and perceived severity in kind of a fun comedic representation. So the next theory we're going to look at, or this model in this particular case, is the Transtheoretical Model. So Transtheoretical Model outlines the stages of behavior change. So there's these 5 different stages. And the most important thing to recognize about the Transtheoretical Model is that it's actually a continuum. So you don't necessarily go from the start to the end. You don't go from 1 to 5 and that's it. Like you've achieved this health condition. At any point, you could actually fall out or go back in again. So basically, the idea behind here is the Transtheoretical Model kind of outlines these potential stages of behavior change. So the first stage is pre-contemplation, where basically the individual has no intention of taking action. Then they move into contemplation, where they're actually considering making a change basically within the next 6 months. So it's like making a New Year's resolution. I'm not going to do it right now, but in 6 months or sometime within that short frame of time, I'm going to actually make a change. I don't think it's severe enough to do it today, but I'm going to make a resolution to make a change. Then in the preparation stage, they're actively becoming involved in what they need to do to make change. So if their resolution in this particular case is to start running, they're going to start researching running shoes. They're going to start buying, a headlamp. They're going to buy a strap for their phone, right? They're going to do something that's going to allow them to start thinking about and taking action. But they're not actually taking action yet. So they're still just kind of like shopping for things. Or if their resolution is to eat more vegetables, they're going to start looking up menus. They're going to start kind of putting together a shopping list, but they're not actually taking action until we get to that action stage. In the action stage, that's where they've actually begun to change their behavior. So now they're actually doing whatever that health behavior is. So again, if it's running, they've actually started running. If it's eating more vegetables, they're actually eating more vegetables. And eventually, once they've done that for a sustained amount of time, we usually say for about 6 months or more, and they're still doing that same health behavior, then we can say that they've moved into the maintenance stage. And the maintenance stage is where they're able to continue those health behaviors. They've actually created the infrastructure, they've created the routine to be able to do this regularly. But what's really important about the Transtheoretical Model, again, it's not a straight start to finish. You don't just, that's it, you're at maintenance forever. A lot of times you actually fall in and out of the cycle. So you can start taking action and then sometimes, it's the holidays, right? So you're not going to exercise. You're going to be inside because it's snowing outside. You're going to be not necessarily eating more fruits and vegetables because you're going to be going to parties and you're going to be having, eggnog and candy canes, whatever it's going to be. So it's going to take you out of that stage and you're going to have to get back into it again. So even if you're in the action or maintenance stage, you can still fall back into that contemplation of like, oh, I need to change my behavior. Again, I need to get back into that routine. So it's not necessarily a start to finish kind of continuum. Here's another fun meme I made for you to focus on the Transtheoretical Model. So this is fun. What is it called? I think it's like the distracted boyfriend meme. I don't know. But basically, it's this idea here of ignoring what's in front of you and looking at something else. So in this particular side of things, I see this as a kind of a representation for this idea of he's in the contemplation stage. So again, just to kind of reiterate those trans-theoretical model stages, in pre-contemplation, the individual has no intention of changing their behavior for the foreseeable future. They may not see their behavior as problematic. So in this particular context, like in this meme, the boyfriend would be fully focused on the old behavior girlfriend. So he would not be considering change. The new behavior wouldn't even be in the frame. It's not even on that individual's radar. So like new behavior walks past him, no reaction, right? Because he's in pre-contemplation, not even thinking about it. In contemplation, the individual starts to recognize that their behavior could be problematic. They begin to consider the possibility of change. However, they're still weighing the pros and cons and have not yet committed to taking action. So in this case, this is why I labeled the boyfriend as contemplation, because he's now looking at that new behavior girl. That's the girl he's distracted by. This, I think, symbolizes his interest and the fact that he's actually considering making a change. So the current girlfriend, who is in this case old behavior, she still holds his attention. So he's not fully committed to change, and he's still kind of torn between old and new. So that's why I think this is the contemplation stage. If we moved into the preparation stage, that's when the individual intends to take action soon, and they might actually start making small steps toward change. So they have decided that the benefits of changing outweigh the drawbacks. So if I was, changing this meme to represent preparation, I would actually probably start to move that boyfriend towards the new and kind of just glancing back at the old. So that would therefore represent this stage where someone they're getting ready to act, but they haven't fully let go of that like old behavior or old girlfriend yet. If we had the action stage is when the individual is actively changing their behavior. So this is the stage that we know requires the most effort and commitment. So if I had a version of this meme that represented action, the boyfriend would be shown fully turning away from the old behavior, which is like his former girlfriend in this case, and he'd be walking, wholeheartedly towards the new behavior. That would signify that he had made that decision to change and he's now acting upon it. If we got to the maintenance stage, which is the final stage, that's when the individual works to sustain the new behavior and to, prevent any sort of relapse. So this is basically just trying to maintain all of that action that they have developed. And so again, that's 6 months or more. So if we had meme, in this case, the boyfriend would be walking hand in hand with the new behavior and the old behavior would be out of the picture. Because now we would see that the boyfriend here would be fully maintaining the new behavior. So he'd be hand in hand with her for at least 6 months. That would indicate like their relationship was 6 months, that had moved them into that maintenance stage. And again, because it is a continuum, at any point, like he could go back to old girlfriend and then have to go back to that whole cycle stage again, or that continuum process. So the social cognitive theory, this is the next theory we're going to look at. This is a theory that kind of emphasizes the role of observational learning and social influence on behavior. So some of the personal factors include an individual's knowledge, expectations, and attitudes. The environmental factors involve the social norms, what's happening in the community, and any sort of influence from others, like outside influences. And the behavioral factors look at the different types of skills and practice need to perform the behavior. Also, a big factor of that behavioral side of things is that self-efficacy, the fact that they believe that they can do it. One of the aspects that we can consider when it comes to the social cognitive theory, sometimes is this idea that's called vicarious learning. Vicarious learning is this idea that sometimes you'll see in like, I didn't put a meme in here of this, but I could have, because it kind of didn't age well, but I'm going to use it anyways. It also tells you how old I am. If you remember this, there used to be this ad that was like from Subway, and it was Jared from Subway, which is why it didn't age well, which is why it didn't put it on this slide. But the idea behind it was like, he was basically saying like, hey guys, I ate 2 Subway sandwiches a day every day, and I lost 100 pounds, right? So if I did it, you can do it, right? So it's the idea of saying like, you find another person who's like a normal person just like you, and you demonstrate if they can do it, then I can do it, right? So if you do what I did, you'll be successful like me. So vicarious experience is this idea of seeing somebody else do it and be successful, and then saying, oh, if they did it, then I can do it too. So that's a really kind of interesting side of the social cognitive theory, because it's really that like community factor. So if you see others in your community, others that you see as peers be successful, then that leads you to have that self-efficacy to believe that you can do it too. And so a lot of times we use that in any sort of like mentorship relationship, where you find somebody who says, okay, I actually was in your shoes. I did it. Here's how I got to where I am. And here's how you can do it too. So that building that self-efficacy by seeing someone else that you identify as being similar to you do it and be successful. Here's my fun example for the social cognitive theory. It's a clip from Mean Girls. So in this clip is one of my favorite parts. So you can scan the QR code, take you to the actual video. It's a fun part of the movie where the main character, Katie, played by Lindsay Lohan, starts to actually adopt the different behaviors and practices of the plastics. Those are like the cool girls on campus. So she starts to take on their behavior, basically due to the social influence and the observational learning. So I feel like it's a good, like it's like a 1-minute clip, but it's like a little montage from the movie. But the idea behind it is originally Katie joins them as a plan to like infiltrate and observe their clique. But over time, she actually begins to adopt their behaviors and attitudes without realizing it. So I think there's a couple parts of this like montage that actually really highlight the social cognitive theory pretty effectively. So one of them is this idea of like behavioral imitation. So you see Katie, she starts to dress like the plastics. She's mimicking their style. She's mimicking their mannerisms. She's mimicking their color schemes. This shows that she's really learning through observation, and she gradually becomes more like them. Another factor is kind of like this attitude shift that occurs. So Katie begins to internalize their values. So she starts to focus on appearance and gossiping and engaging in the different types of social games that the plastics engage in. She also starts prioritizing popularity over the things that she previously did, like friendships and academic achievements. There's also a big factor here that focuses on peer influence. So throughout the montage, it's really clear that Katie's becoming influenced by Regina George and the other plastics. And so this demonstrates how social pressure and the desire to fit in can actually drive behavioral changes. There's some great parts of it that you start to see in here, especially because in this even 1-minute clip, it shows how the internal monologue is changing. So she shifts from this critical observation of the plastics to actually kind of like rationalizing and accepting their behavior. So I really think that, oh, it's so, simplistic, but it is a really great scene that illustrates the social cognitive theory, because it really shows how Katie's personal factors, like her initial values and beliefs, they become overridden due to the different types of like environmental factors, like the social norms and the behaviors of the plastics, and how other people at the school are now starting to react to her, those social norms. And this over time leads to changes in her behavior. So yeah, I'm a lot of fun to watch movies with, or TV shows, as you can tell from now, because each time I watch something, I'll be like, oh my God, look, it's a social cognitive theory. And everybody that I'm with is like, I don't know what you're talking about. But I find these clips and moments in real life that I think are so relevant that I just have to throw them in. So I think they hopefully help cement some of these topics. So when you're thinking about the social cognitive theory, go ahead and think about Mean Girls. And the next model we have is the ecological model. And the ecological model really considers multiple levels of influence on health behavior. So we start off at the individual level. And the individual level is when you're looking at that person's knowledge, attitudes, beliefs, their, the thing that represents their individual characteristics. But then you look at the interpersonal level that involve their family, their friends, their social networks, and then you move into their organizational levels, which is the different organizations that they interact with. So that can be schools, workplaces, churches, any sort of social institution. And then you get to the community level, which is where it's this systemic type of thing where you're looking at cultural values, norms, and that broader social environment. Next up, we have the community-based participatory research model. Sometimes we call this CVPR because it is such a mouthful. It's a partnership kind of approach where community members and researchers collaborate equitably. So the kind of core tenets of the model focus on kind of this idea of co-learning and capacity building. So basically, both the researchers and the community members benefit from each other's expertise. So it really involves this long-term commitment to sustainable interventions and, developing relationships that are mutually beneficial. Then we get to the diffusion of innovations theory, which explains kind of an idea of how new ideas and technologies spread through a population. So it identifies a couple of different stages. And so we see innovators who are the first to embrace new ideas, followed by early adopters who are often opinion leaders, then the early majority who adopts new ideas before the average person, while the late majority does so after the majority has adopted it. And then finally, the laggards who are the last to adopt, often holding on to the traditional values. I tend to think of a good example of the diffusion of innovations theory, which is anytime some sort of new technology comes out, new iPhone, whatever, right? New iPhone comes out. There are going to be people out there who don't care what it does. They just know that it's new and they're going to be the first ones to get it. They're going to be in line at 4 a.m. Those are the innovators. They don't even know what it does yet, but they are on board and they are doing it, right? Then you have the early adopters. So they're going to wait to kind of hear what the innovators say. They're going to wait for the innovator feedback. They're going to wait for some of the reviews, but they're going to jump on board in the beginning, right? They're not the first ones in line, but they're going to get online. The early majority is the majority, most people. So they adopt it before the average person, but they're waiting. They're really waiting for the innovators and the early adopters and all of the feedback and to really have a better understanding of what's happening. Then the late majority, they wait until almost everybody has it. And then they think, oh, that actually looks pretty good, right? Maybe I'll do that too. So as I say, I think of it like the iPhone. Because when the iPhone first came out, I had, so again, tells you how old I am. I had a really cool flip phone. It was an LG. It was LG the V. Had a little keyboard on it. And I thought it was great because at the keyboard, you could actually touch with your thumbs. And the iPhone came out and I was like, you're going to type with one hand? That's so dumb. Like I would never do that. Like I love my LG. Like this is where it's at. The internet was garbage on it. It was so slow. It had like a 1 megapixel camera, right? But I was like, I'm not getting the iPhone. That's dumb, right? And a bunch of people around me did. And I was like, oh, okay. So I think I was in that early majority where I was like, okay, I guess I can see some benefits. And then the late majority started getting, and like almost everybody did. And then there's the laggards, the people who ours, maybe some of the Android people who were like, I'm getting out of that iPhone. Like I'm unmotivated by that new technology. I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm really happy about that. And I'm not going to be swayed by what everybody else in the community is doing. Right? Those are those green iMessage people. They're not gonna bend. They don't care. They're going to do what they want to do. So it's kind of like a basic example. But whenever something comes out like that, and people are in line, like you don't even know what it does yet. You innovators, get me with my theories swirling around in my head. So here's another great example. As you know, again, super fun because I love some of these viral videos. This is a viral video from a TED Talk. It's called The First Follower. So this is just a clip from that TED Talk. But the idea behind it is it shows like a guy. He's at like a music festival. He's dancing all by himself. The music's playing. He's dancing, right? But it kind of then leads to first people are kind of looking at him like he's dancing wildly. And everyone's like, oh my God, what are you doing? But then, he eventually has another person join in with him. And then another person joins in, and that lone dancer then becomes the leader. And then eventually more and more and more people join in, which creates overall this large dancing crowd. So that the guy who was the lone dancer, he's now kind of sparked a movement. So I see this as like that lone dancer represents the innovator in the diffusion of innovations theory. So again, innovators, these are the people who are willing to take risks. They're willing to try out new ideas or behaviors before anybody else. They can be seen as eccentric. They can be seen as unconventional because they deviate from the social norms. So, and again, in the clip, the innovator behavior, he is dancing wildly all by himself. Initially, he appears unusual. No one else is participating. So he's taken a risk. He's trying something new. Then there's the early adopter, the first follower. The first follower joins the lone dancer. And so he represents the early adopter. Early adopters are crucial in this diffusion process because they are respected within their social networks and they have influence to attract more people to this, new idea, this behavior. So in the video, that first follower's decision to join the lone dancer, that actually helps to legitimize the behavior. It makes it more accessible and less risky for others to join in. That first follower demonstrates the power of social influence. And really what he's doing is he's showing other people that like, it's okay to participate. This guy's not crazy. This is actually really fun and you guys should try it too. Then there's the early majority. So after the first follower joins, a few more people begin to dance. And so this represents that early majority. The early majority is typically more cautious than the early adopters, but they'll adopt the new behavior once they start to see other people doing it, and then they perceive it as less risky. So as more and more people join in, the behavior starts to shift from something that's unusual to something that's widely accepted. This kind of creates like a tipping point where that new behavior begins to rapidly gain traction. So this kind of represents the idea of like critical mass and social proof, because basically once enough people are dancing, then that behavior actually becomes the new norm. So even those who were initially hesitant, like those late majority, that's when they're likely to join in, because now they're seeing this dancing or whatever the activity or behavior is as the new normal. So this is such an important part of that diffusion process, where the social proof and the idea that people follow the actions of others really represents this like significant part of the process. And then of course, there's laggards at the end. The video doesn't show laggards, but they exist. They would be represented by those who join the dance only after it's becoming overwhelmingly popular, or those who don't participate at all. Even everyone else is dancing, they're still going to sit there. They're the laggards. They're the last to adopt the new behavior. Usually they are really skeptical of it. They're resistant to change. They do not believe that this is going to become a thing, even when everybody else around them is doing it. So logic models are kind of more of a tool, but there's something that we see a lot in public health, really an important part, especially of any sort of like grant writing process, because it's an opportunity for us to really create the infrastructure to use for planning, implementing, and evaluating programs. So it includes a variety of sections. So the image I have on here is kind of the template that you tend to see in most logic models. The idea behind it is there's a column you can see in the yellow that's for inputs, and inputs are the resources that are invested in the program. There are activities, and activities are part of what you're doing as kind of how you're going to get there. You're looking at the inputs and the activities, and then the outputs, which are outputs are the direct products of these activities. So the activities are really part of that input, like inputs which you're going to put into it. What resources are you going to put in? What activities are you going to do? And then what is that going to lead to in terms of the direct products of these activities? Outcomes then represent the changes in behavior, changes of knowledge, change in skills, change of conditions, basically whatever those outcomes of your program are. So again, logic models are something you see a lot in program planning and evaluation. You see them a lot in grant writing. Anytime you're creating a program and you want to evaluate whether or not it's successful, you create a logic model in the very beginning so that you can kind of see, like, if I do this, what's likely to come out as a result. Then we have the precede-proceed model. Precede-proceed has two different steps to it. There's precede and then there's proceed. There is a cute acronym for it. I never remember what it is. I don't think it's important for you to remember it either. But basically, it's a planning framework for health promotion and disease prevention programs. So that first phase, that precede phase, that involves the social, epidemiological, educational, and ecological assessments that we use to identify health issues. Then the proceed phase covers implementation, process evaluation, impact evaluation, and outcome evaluation to basically ensure that the program is effective. So this was kind of a deep dive into all of those theories and models that you're likely to see in public health. But I kind of want to go like one step further, which is kind of, now that we've explored those foundational theories and models, let's talk a little bit about how those frameworks are applied in practice, because understanding the theory is an important step, but it's just the first step. Then the true value actually comes from knowing how to use these models to address real-world health challenges. So the next thing is to really talk about how to translate this theory into action, how to use these models to guiding yourself in the design, implementation, and the evaluation of public health programs. So this is where those abstract concepts that we covered, they become concrete strategies that you can use to actually make an impact on community health. So, again, now that we have covered the theories and models, the way we apply them a lot of times is we use theories for problem identification to really understand the public health issue. Then we apply the models to design interventions that are targeted and theory-based. And then during implementation, we follow the best practices informed by these theories. And then finally, we use theoretically grounded metrics for evaluation in order to assess the outcomes and their impacts. So you tend to see theoretical frameworks in well-designed research studies. That can be in systematic or scoping reviews of literature. It can be in primary qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods research. But for the most part, when you're looking at a strong research background, you're looking for some sort of theoretical framework. So you're using something that's not just anecdotal experience, like, hey, I observed something and therefore I think this hypothesis is valid. A lot of times you want to use theory to say how you either think something is going to occur, why you think something is going to occur, but you make a hypothesis before you begin your research. And so theories and models are a good place to say, based on evidence of health behavior, this is why we think this intervention is going to be successful. This is why we think people are going to behave this way. So you oftentimes see a theoretical framework as part of the introduction, and then again in the discussion as this backbone that kind of guides inquiry and discovery. So a lot of times when we look at strong, peer-reviewed research, one of the things you're evaluating is there a theoretical framework? Is this based on models that actually tells us why intervention is likely to be successful, why individuals are behaving the way that they are? And then, I think it's just important to mention that there are always challenges and limitations to theories and models. So they're valuable, but they also do have limitations. They can sometimes lead to oversimplification where, again, you're trying to say, like, based on the theory, this is going to happen, but they're not necessarily then capturing the full complexity of real world kind of behaviors. There's also a risk of cultural bias, because many theories and models are developed in Western contexts based on traditional medicine, on different types of insurance paradigms, access to healthcare. Sometimes it's important to remember then, as our world rapidly change, these theories, they actually might not keep up with the cultural, societal, and social aspects of health. So this can actually then lead to integration challenges. So sometimes it means that even though a theory has been valuable in the past, it might not be valuable based on the current social or cultural aspects of a population. And then finally, I think it's just important to remember the importance of evaluation adaptation. It is crucial to regularly assess the effectiveness of theories and models in specific contexts. So therefore, we need to be flexible. We need to adapt. We need to sometimes combine theories as necessary in order to fit the local culture or demographic, and also to make sure that we are adapting to the evolving circumstances in our social context. And then, finally, we need to embrace innovation. We need to be able to develop new theories and models based on emerging research, practical experiences, and also to make sure that we are able to stay at the forefront of public health intervention strategies. So theories and models are not infallible. They are sometimes, as you can see, tied to social and cultural norms. That means they are able to be changed based on technology, based on things like we have, AI and other types of technology, simulation, virtual reality. These are things that can absolutely impact our social, our cultural, our educational norms. And so as a result, we have to make sure that we are constantly assessing these theories and models and making sure that they are still appropriate in the context in which we are applying them. So this was an overview of the most important theories and models you're likely to see in public health, especially as you're reading articles. I really want you to keep an eye out and see where these are being utilized. And then also, as you're developing your own research papers, as you're creating your own research projects, to always make sure that you're thinking about a theoretical framework that helps to integrate the health behaviors you're expecting to see and why you think an intervention is likely to be successful. It needs to be based on theory. Oftentimes, we also see sometimes conceptual models, which are now taking multiple theories and models together into a visually graphic demonstration. So that's another way you can actually see theoretical frameworks and models change and develop, is creating opportunities for them to actually connect in different factors. So you can have an entire conceptual model which contains multiple theories and models integrated into one conceptual framework for a research design. So hopefully now that you're aware of them, you'll see them more as you're reading articles, and keep them in mind as you start to do your own research in public health as well. Hope this was helpful. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.